This video is brought to you by my new book, Genesis Saga: A Call to Aid. If you're craving a science fantasy adventure that's more in the spirit of Star Wars before Disney ruined it, then feel free to check out the links in the description. It's available in both ebook and paperback. A few years ago at PAX, I had the pleasure of meeting some fine men from a local Australian game studio. Massive monster, and they were showcasing an early build of a game that caught my eye that was called Cult of the Lamb. I loved it, and I saw in that early build the potential for greatness, and it was something that I kept on my radar ever since. Now it's finally out in its full release, and I have to say the greatness I saw was but a glimpse of something far, far greater. Something so much more, something that comes as close as possible to gently caressing the cheek of God. So suffice to say, this may very well be my game of the year, and it fills me with some nationalistic pride, to be honest, to see an Australian game make such waves with audiences. So if you'd be so kind as to sit down, I'm going to tell you why I enjoyed my time with this game so very, very much. The first thing to say about Cult of the Lamb is its art direction. It's what initially drew me to the game in the first place. Its cutesy, cartoony style that's juxtaposed against a dark world of malevolent gods, vicious cultists, and oppressive supernatural misery. I love it. It's all presented like what I can best articulate as either a pop-up comic or a 3D cartoon. Granted though, this presentation can lead to an issue that's similar to the original Golden Axe. You see, it's easy at times to misjudge where the lamb is and launch an attack that will miss when you thought it was going to hit. But like Golden Axe, it's more of an annoyance than a major gripe, and it can be easily overcome as you become more familiar with the action part of the gameplay, creating something that's a cross between, well, Golden Axe and Happy Tree Friends when you're in the thick of the action. Gameplay itself is divided between two core pillars: roguelite dungeon crawling and Animal Crossing style cult management. The dungeon crawling takes place in randomly generated dungeons, each of which is a region controlled by a bishop with their own themes, enemies, and resources. We enter each area of a dungeon and we hack and slash at the enemies until they're all dead before we can move on to another area. When we first enter, we're given a starting weapon and spell, and if we're lucky, we'll either find a blacksmith offering a new weapon to use, or a room will spawn in with a choice between a new weapon or a new spell. There's a good variety of spells and weapons to use with their own pros and cons. For instance, daggers are fast but they deal next to no damage, while hammers, they deal the most damage but they're so slow that enemies can easily move out of the way. Throw in upgrades that add more weapons and spell types to the pool, and even fleeces that add subtle passive buffs, and you've got a thoroughly varied and enjoyable combat experience. Something else you can also run into during the dungeon runs is a fortune teller. This guy dishes out a choice between two random tarot cards which function as perks that expire at the end of the run, and they can drastically complement or change a preferred playstyle. But what can ultimately bring this part of the game down is a common aspect of roguelites, the RNG. Take random number generation with the previous issue with the presentation, and it's only a matter of time until you run into something that, if it doesn't kill you, will basically leave you on death's door. However, the cult management absolutely dwarfs the dungeon crawling in addictiveness. This thing is genuinely so much fun, upgrading your cult's compound, issuing out commandments to influence your cult's faith, and working the compound up until it's self-sustaining. But what really does make it fun is how the two different pillars of gameplay are in symbiosis with one another. You do the dungeon runs to get the resources and cultists you need to get your cult going, or you build up the cult in order to unlock upgrades and equipment in order to give the lamb a stronger fighting chance right off of the bat. At first you work on the cult to do better in the dungeon runs, but before you know it, it flips around, where you're now doing the dungeon runs not because they're fun, but to help your cult out with the resources that can't be self-generated, and that's when you're hooked and absolutely loving it.
la campagna c'è una macchina.
Something else that makes the cult management so much fun are the emergent stories that can be generated by your cultists. There is a set story in the game where the last lamb that's about to be sacrificed to the 4 bishops in order to prevent a prophecy of their deaths from happening. But things don't go right, and now we're the avatar of a forgotten god tasked with slaying the bishops so he may return and building a cult in his name. It's a good story, and there are some really likeable characters that help make up its cast, but what stuck out more to me were the requests that my cultists asked of me every once in a while, where they'll come up to you and ask for something starting a side quest. From these you get some enjoyable little side stories, and the request can be anything from collect some bones from a specific dungeon to them wanting to eat a literal bowl of poo. It also helps that each cultist is truly unique. They're randomly generated with personality traits, and they grow old and die, and their deaths will be felt by the wider cult. Granted, it's nowhere near the level of narrative generation we've seen in Shadow of Mordor or Shadow of War, but that doesn't mean these stories are any less enjoyable. For example, after re-educating a dissenter, I made them my beloved and married them. Had a long and faithful marriage before they passed away. And then, I harvested their body for food and ate it as prep for a dungeon run. Then I married the cultist I'd already made my faith enforcer as my new spouse. Truly, a love story for the ages. Now, I should take this moment to point out that I do have one major criticism with the game, and that's that the cult management can get very micromanagement heavy. Until you have the upgrades or resources to build certain buildings, you basically have to do everything for your cult. Like clean their poo, clean their vomit, plant crops, tend to crops, harvest crops, help the cultists when they're sick, and the list just goes on and on. But once you do have the relevant buildings built, a lot of that goes away. Granted though, some of it does stick around and cannot be avoided. Like if you build outhouses, then you don't need to run around cleaning up all the poo as much as before. Instead, you need to empty them out when they're full. Or if you let the cult's faith get too low, then you better be ready to give out blessings like they're hotcakes and grind out the bones needed to dance around the bonfire, or else they're not going to be loyal and walk away, leaving you pissing in the wind. Beyond the micromanagement, any other complaints I have are really just nitpicks that are forgettable. I have heard some things about different versions of the game though, like that the Switch version is suffering from some technical problems, but I can't comment on that, since I played this on my desktop. Although I have heard about some jank going on all versions, but my version ran fine and I didn't experience something like a request to resurrect someone who was still alive. Those few things that I did notice certainly didn't stop me from having one hell of a good time though. Cult of the Lamb is easily one goddamn good game. One of the best games I've played in recent years, and I dare say it's a top contender for my personal game of the year. It's got fun gameplay, charm, and a unique world that I want to learn and see more of, so I hope this gets an expansion at some point. Cult of the Lamb is an absolute must-buy, no question. Go get it. Alright, thanks for checking out this review. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you really like it, then please hit the like and the subscribe buttons to boost me in the algorithm. Or better yet, maybe check out my book. I think you might enjoy it. For the next game review, I'm actually planning to take a look at Gloomwood. I've had my eye on this for quite a while, and I am planning to take a look at its early access release. Can't wait to sink my teeth into what is essentially what Thief 4 should have been. And I've also started a new review series I like to call 10 30-second reviews. This is exclusive to BitChute and Odyssey, and it's basically what it says on the tin. It's 10 30-second reviews or first impressions, all of which are unscripted. I've already done one already, and I recommend you guys give it a look. It's actually a lot of fun, really enjoyed making it. Anyway, I got all that and more coming up, so please stick around.